Hey there everyone, it's me Lauren with APQS. I'm an APQS sales educator and rep in the Central Florida area. We're here at the Bold Notion Quilt Shop taking a quick minute to talk to you about thread. So there are a lot of things that you want to consider when you're selecting the right thread for your project or the right thread to run in your long arm quilting machine. This is not just specific to APQS quilting machines, but in general, things that you want to consider until you find the right combination that works perfectly in harmony with your machine. Now, I know I'll hear some people say, my machine doesn't like, or my machine doesn't like this, or my machine can't use this, or can't use that. And while it might be true that you're having some trouble with various kinds of threads on your machine, the answer is more that you haven't taken the time to fine tune and find out how to make your machine accept the thread. Now that could be something that is a little more difficult, right? And that we don't want to deal with because it's a lot of hassle to figure it out between the different threads. But hopefully today some of the tips that I can give you can help you use different and various kinds of threads for your machine so that you don't feel the tug on your heart trying to get those threads to work just right. When you're selecting threads for your projects, you want to be sure that you're selecting for color first. Okay, so let's think about how this thread color is going to impact our overall project, right? If you get something that is black and you want to quilt and you want that thread to really stand out, then you're going to want to pick something that is going to give you a more contrasted statement so that it shows a visually impactful thread path on your project so that you can see it. You have to be able to quilt with a lot of confidence to see thread like this on your fabric so that you know that your lines are going exactly where they need to go. If you look real hard, mine don't, right? And so you want to pick for contrast, color pop, wow factor, or you might want to pick threads or variations of threads that really blend in with your project. So if we look at this on the back end, right, we have one light color of thread on the back to blend so that all you see is beautiful texture. Okay, we've got a couple different colors on the front end so that it blends in various portions of my quilt top. Now, I'll pick the colors of threads based off whether I want my threads to blend or to contrast, depending on how much I actually want the viewer to see my thread lines. That might depend on the confidence in my quilting or just the overall look or aesthetic that I want to go for on my quilt top. Once you've kind of selected a color that you might want to go with based off of the overall design aesthetic of your quilt top, you want to select the type of thread that it is that you're going to use next. So types of thread can be a polyester, a cotton, and various weights of threads too. So it might be a poly or a cotton that's a 60 weight versus a 40 weight or an 80 weight versus a 100 weight. There are different reasons why you might want to select different threads. So for this project, you can see I used a 40 weight, and it's a little, I mean, that's your normal, edge to edge, moderate quilting weight thread. It is strong, it is sturdy, and it is made for utility quilting, but it also allows for your threads to show an additive of color, which is something that I wanted to use in this particular piece. So one other thing I wanted to show you too is that this is a 40 weight poly, and I think a lot of times, well, I'll wait to show you that in just a second, but I think a lot of times people associate polyester threads with a very shiny sheen thread, and that's because we associate poly with like embroidery thread. And there are, just like when you go to the store and you're buying different colors of paint, right? And they've got different glosses. You've got semi-gloss, gloss, you've got satin, which is less than semi-gloss, and then you've got matte, which is like a flat paint and doesn't have any sheen. You can actually get a polyester thread and you can see like the little fuzzies on this guy, right? This is just a brand new cone I opened up. This is actually made to look like a cotton thread. Okay, so it has got a matte finish like a cotton. There's only this bit of sheen because we've got a nice light source from the window coming at us, right? And then you can compare that to a 40 weight. Look at the shine on that with a 40 weight. This is a 40 weight polyester. This is a 50 weight polyester spun, so it's made to look like a matte cotton. And this is a regular 3-ply trilobal. And then you can look at those. I tried to get gray threads, right? In conjunction with this middle one, which is a 60 weight thread, okay? And that 60 weight thread is going to have overall less sheen than the 40 weight when you quilt with it. So And these are all Glide. So we've got Glide 40 weight, Glide 60 weight, and then the Glide Primo Soft, which is made to look like a matte cotton. Those are the threads that I love and work really well for my machine. But you could get another matte poly would be like a signature, like a So Fine, would be fantastic too. And that one actually has less lint than the polyester Primo Soft. So this was done with the 40 weight trilobal polyester, and you can see the threads really well when they're contrasting, not so well when they blend, right? So you actually can see that the Glide, even though it looks shiny in the 40 weight, the Glide polyester really looks more like a satin finish. It doesn't have that bright polyester sheen to it like maybe a Magnifico or something like that that's actually made for embroidery. It is a trilobal for 40 weight, so it's got that triangular shape, and I guess it's like shaved down into a triangle. So it's actually made to reflect more light so that you can see it. Whereas a 60 weight can be phenomenal and kind of being the master of blenders. So a 60 weight Glide thread, the 60 weight Glide thread, this is 2-ply, which means there are 2 strands spun together to make your overall filament thread. So it's a 2-ply filament, which means that the strands are actually circular. So the circular strands are going to reflect less light than the trilobal triangular color strands. And so what happens is it becomes this masterful blender of threads, which is amazing. I quilted this entire quilt top with a 60 weight white thread on my pastel green, my peach, and my purple. And you can see that although it might show that it's slightly lighter or a little bit more sheen to it, it almost looks like it's a light green or a light peach or a light purple thread. So I'm going to show this to you. It's done with a 60 weight white. And you can see just how well all of that really blends together. I even used it on the back. So you can see on whole portions and patchwork, right? It really looks like a light green or light purple or kind of that orangey, peachy, creamish thread. So the real benefit to that is that it allows for me to not have to break my threads, right? I can kind of just quilt everywhere, get into my spaces, get out of my spaces, and it's really going to blend. You do have to really play around with just that right color. We have 22 colors of Glide 60 weight that are going to match well with your thread. You're going to have the same effects, maybe even better results if you get weights that are even thinner. So the higher the number, the thinner the thread. The lower the number, the thicker the thread. I know it's opposite of what you think that it would be. So a 40 weight is going to be much thicker in diameter than a 60 weight thread's going to be, okay? So if you get an 80 weight as opposed to the 60 weight thread, right? It's going to blend even better with the modicum of colors, with the arrangement of colors that you have right for your quilt top. So that's something that you want to consider too, that your thread weight matters. So if you really want to see the thread or you're doing utility quilting, get your base 40 weight or 50 weight thread. Those are fantastic for utility quilting, even moderate custom quilting, or you can go even lower in number but thicker in thread, where you're getting that like 28 weight or thicker threads where you can see really dense, deep thread work, and that might be something that you're doing for artistic purposes or other reasons. So those are things that you want to consider when you're selecting threads for your particular quilt top and your particular project. Real quick thing I want to touch on, your machine for APQS is timed to a 4.0 needle. So it's a Gros-Becker 4.0 needle, all right? And so those are fantastic for 40 and 50 weight threads. The eye of the needle is big enough to accommodate both of those, to quilt fast with them, quilt slow with them, and you're not going to have problems with friction or the eye being so small that it's cutting or shredding your threads. But as you get into thinner or thicker threads, you might have to adjust your needle size up a half step to a 4.5 or down a half step to a 3.5 from that 4.0 original point. So when I'm using my 60 weight, 80 weight, 100 weight threads, I'm generally using a 3.5. If I'm getting into the 100 weight threads, I'll use a 3.0, but your machine is only timed to go up and down by a half of a step. So if I want to go down to a full step of a 3.0, if I'm going to be doing that consistently, I may need to retime my machine to accommodate the 3.0 needle. Otherwise, it might result in, skip stitches or different things that can happen when the time of your hook isn't hitting the back of your needle just right. Okay, so those are precautions that I want to let you know. But needle pairings are important too. And then, of course, if you're working with your thread and you're having bits of shredding or tearing, sometimes it can't be helped, and it's easier for us if you kind of go up a 1/2 needle size. So maybe you're using a 40 weight thread and you're using a 4.0 needle. You might want to go up to a 4.5 needle and still maintain the 40 weight thread, so that way the needle's eye gets a little bit bigger and it gives that thread a little more time to pass in and out of the quilt sandwich to get the quilting job done. Alrighty, so make sure that you're selecting for color, for sheen, for blendability, and then also for utility of your quilt top and your overall project when you're done. And I know that you're going to have great success, and make sure that you take into account the size of your needle, because that matters. If your needle is too big, might make your holes too big. You might see in between all the little dots that you're making when you're stitching. If your needle's too small, it could end up in resulting in shredding and breakage and different things that can happen too, when there's just not enough time for that thread to pass through the quilt sandwich, and it's created added extra friction and such as you're quilting. So then, of course, when you're using your top threads and you want to pair with your bottom threads, you kind of want to play around a little bit what's going to work best for you, for your tolerance of what you're able to play around with on your machine, and then also, what your machine is naturally vibing to. You do want to kind of play around with that. You can spin, wind the bobbins on the aluminum bobbins if you want, or you can get like the magnetic pre-wound bobbins. I do a ton of edge-to-edge quilts, and so for me it's so much faster for me to pop a bobbin out of the box, pop it into my bobbin case, and go. So when you're using the aluminum bobbins, you need to have a bobbin case with the spring. When you're using the magnetics, you want to have one without the spring in it. That is because the spring can sometimes catch on the threads that don't have a side to an aluminum bobbin side. And so as it's kind of going around inside the bobbin case, that can catch on the spring. Many people quilt with the spring in with the magnetic bobbins and have no problem. Do what works best for you, but the manufacturer of the magnetic wound bobbins recommends that you take the spring out, okay? The magnet on it acts as the backlash spring so that your bobbin doesn't overspin. When we're talking bobbins to top thread ratio, which is really what I wanted to talk to you about, it is okay to mix and match a 60 weight bobbin with a 40 weight top, or a 40 weight bobbin with a 60 weight top. You kind of want to play by ear for what's going to work best for your particular quilt top, what you want it to look and feel like when you're done, and of course, how utility you need it stitched. So the more utility that you need, if you're just doing like an edge-to-edge pantograph, I like to err on the side of 40 to 50 weight top and bobbin threads. If my pantograph is really dense that I'm quilting, and my designs are less than an inch apart, I'll probably use a 60 weight thread, because then I have enough threads in a small enough area that it stays together through wash and wear and tear. If I'm using a monofilament thread, I love to pair that with a 60 weight bobbin, largely because a 60 weight has a little bit of give to it. If you've got a 60 weight thread, break it off right now. See what that feels like. It's almost kind of like a piece of hair. It's got a little bit of a stretch and then a break. And so that forgiveness in the thread allows forgiveness with a finicky thread like a monofilament, which is the clear plasticky kind or the smoky plasticky kind that you can use on your quilt top. And so that little bit of forgiveness helps to ensure that you have less thread breakage and things as you go. What else can we talk about with bobbins? I like to have different bobbin cases. One that's set for 40 and 60 weight pre-wound, because that's primarily what I use, and then one that's set for 40 and one that's set for 60 for self-wound bobbins if I need particular colors that I can't get in the already pre-wound bobbins. And that's because when we set our tension, we set our bobbin tensions first, right? So if my bobbin case is already set up for that 60 weight pre-wound bobbin, I know that I'm already starting from the best possible point that I can start with for my tension game when I'm trying to figure that out in pairing with different top threads. So that can be really helpful for you too. Other finicky threads such as metallics, those are fantastic to pair with the 60, 80, 100 weight. The higher the number, the thinner the thread, so the better it's going to be when you're using those really fragile or brittle what I like to call accent threads. They're not utility threads, they're not going to hold your quilt together, but they can make some beautiful accents, embroidery, or embellishment on your quilt top as you're quilting along, such as a hologram thread or a metallic thread or rayon threads that are metallics as well. So those are things that you can consider too when you're trying to pick the right threads for your particular quilt top journey. I hope that this information was helpful for you. Again, I am Lauren, an APQS sales rep and educator here in Central Florida, and I was happy to take this time to talk to you a little bit about threads. If you guys have any more questions or comments, feel free to share below. To comment below, you can share this video and like and subscribe to the APQS YouTube channel so that you can get more of these wonderful videos as they're coming out. Thank you guys for joining me and have a wonderful day. Happy stitching, y'all. Bye.